I wasn't supposed to be home that night. That thought still haunts me, like an echo I can't escape. It was a Wednesday evening, and my flight from Chicago had been delayed. A business trip that was supposed to last 2 more days had dragged on longer than I could handle. The chaos at the airport, combined with the late-night rerouting of flights, had me beyond frustrated. So, in a moment of impulse, I decided to surprise my wife, Claire, by coming home early. I should have stayed away. The house was eerily dark when I arrived, the only light coming from the soft glow spilling from the upstairs window. The silence of the house seemed oppressive, as if it were holding its breath. My footsteps echoed sharply on the hardwood floor as I made my way up the stairs. I imagined Claire curled up in bed, perhaps reading a book or watching one of her old, comforting movies. But as I neared our bedroom, something was off. I heard it, a hushed murmur of voices, laughter. Hers and someone else's. I pushed open the door, and what I saw before me felt like a brutal punch to the stomach. Claire, my wife of 10 years, was tangled up in the sheets with Daniel, my best friend and business partner. For a moment, none of us moved, the weight of the scene hanging in the air. Claire's face carried an air of irritation, as though I'd interrupted something trivial. Daniel looked like a ghost, his mouth slightly open, frozen in a stammer. Claire was the first to break the silence. "You're home early," she said, her voice so casual. It felt as though she were commenting on the weather. I didn't respond. I turned and walked away, my steps deliberate, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing my fury. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The morning after, everything felt surreal. I woke up early, brewed coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper as if the events of the previous night had been some terrible dream. When Claire came downstairs, her eyes studied me with a cautious look, as if trying to read the unreadable. She was testing the waters, trying to gauge if I knew, if I cared. "Good morning," she said, her voice light but forced. I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Morning." The tension between us was suffocating, but I gave her nothing. Over the years, I had perfected the art of masking my emotions, a skill I honed through high-stakes business negotiations. Today, I used it to my advantage. I kissed her on the cheek before heading out the door, leaving her to wonder what I was really thinking. At the office, Daniel greeted me with his usual charm, though his handshake lingered a moment too long, and his smile was tight. He knew. They both knew. But they thought I'd let it slide. That was their first mistake. Over the next few weeks, I focused on creating a sense of normalcy. I went about my routine as if nothing had changed, maintaining my work and home life as usual. Claire and Daniel, thinking the coast was clear, started to relax. Their paranoia faded with each passing day. But underneath the calm surface, I was busy. I was planning their downfall. As co-owners of the investment firm, Daniel and I had always divided our responsibilities. But I began to subtly shift the balance, taking on more of his duties while quietly undermining his influence. I made sure he was excluded from key meetings, and when he did attend, I steered the conversations away from his contributions. At first, he didn't notice. When he finally did, he shrugged it off as my overbearing nature, a joke between us. I also hired a private investigator to gather evidence of their affair. The photos and videos he provided were damning. Stolen kisses in hotel lobbies, intimate dinners, texts filled with promises and lies. I kept everything on a secure drive, biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to expose them. 2 months later, I suggested a business retreat. I pitched it as an opportunity to celebrate the firm's recent success and strengthen our team's bond. Daniel was all for it, just as I expected. Claire, too, seemed eager, especially when I mentioned bringing her along. Little did they know, they thought this was the perfect chance to be together under my nose. They had no idea what I had planned. The retreat was set at a luxury resort, a secluded villa perched on a cliff with an endless view of the ocean. I spared no expense, making sure every detail was perfect. The setting was idyllic, the kind of place where secrets could easily be hidden or exposed. On the first night, I watched them closely. Claire's hand brushed against Daniel's arm too often. Her laughter was too loud, too forced. Daniel, for his part, seemed unusually subdued. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Either way, it didn't matter. The trap was already in motion. The night before we were set to leave, I invited both Claire and Daniel to a special dinner. The table was set on the villa's terrace, illuminated by flickering candles and the soft glow of the moon. The ocean stretched endlessly below, its waves crashing against the rocks like a heartbeat. Claire wore the red dress I had bought her for our anniversary, and Daniel, ever the charmer, arrived in a perfectly tailored suit. They looked like the perfect couple. It made me sick. Halfway through the meal, I could hardly bear to look at them. The sight of them together, so comfortable, so utterly shameless, stoked the fire inside me. But I would wait. Every move I made, every word I spoke, was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. They would pay for what they'd done, and I would be the one to make them realize just how much. I raised my glass, the soft clink of it cutting through the tension in the air. To new beginnings, I said, locking eyes with Claire. She hesitated, her smile faltering slightly, as though she could sense the shift in the atmosphere. New beginnings, I repeated, nodding. Yes, it's time for a change. With deliberate slowness, I placed a thick folder on the table between us, watching their faces for any sign of recognition. I've been doing some thinking, I continued, and I've decided to sell the company. Daniel nearly choked on his wine. What? He stammered. It's all in there, I said, gesturing to the folder. The paperwork is already signed. As of tomorrow, the firm will belong to an investment group in New York. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before adding, Congratulations, Daniel. You're out of a job. Claire's face drained of color. You can't do this, she whispered, the shock in her voice palpable. Oh, but I can, I replied, leaning back in my chair, savoring the weight of the moment. You see, everything, the house, the business, the accounts, it's all in my name. You both thought you were so clever, sneaking around behind my back. But I've been one step ahead of you this entire time. I stood up, pulling out my phone. And just in case you're thinking of denying it, I said coldly, I have proof. Daniel's face turned crimson. You planned this, he stammered, his voice a mix of panic and disbelief. Of course I did, I said, savoring the look in his eyes. The mixture of rage and fear was almost intoxicating. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I'd let you destroy everything I've built? No, Daniel. I spent months ensuring that when this house of cards collapsed, you'd be crushed beneath it. Claire's hands trembled as she reached for the folder, flipping through the papers with growing desperation. Her breath came in shallow gasps. You can't do this to us, she said, her voice cracking. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. You did this to yourselves. The fallout from that night was swift and brutal. By the time we returned from the retreat, the news had already spread like wildfire. The firm was no longer ours. The sale was finalized, and the new owners wasted no time dismantling everything we had built. Daniel, scrambling to salvage his career, found himself with nowhere to turn. His reputation, once a strong asset, was now in tatters. I had strategically leaked the truth, or at least my version of it, to the business community, painting him as incompetent and unethical. As for Claire, I sent the evidence of her affair to her closest friends and family. The whispers began almost immediately, like a virus spreading through her social circle. The tight-knit group she had carefully cultivated over the years dissolved one by one. Invitations stopped coming. Her once perfect life began to unravel, leaving her isolated, humiliated. The woman who had once been admired for her grace and charm was now a pariah. But I wasn't done yet. Stripping them of their status, their wealth. That was only part of it. I wanted them to feel the emptiness, the crushing sense of betrayal, the loss that I had endured. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to have everything slip away. Daniel tried to salvage his reputation, reaching out to industry contacts, pleading for opportunities. But I had been meticulous. Every door he knocked on was slammed shut. I made sure the right people knew exactly who he was. Toxic, untrustworthy, reckless, and utterly incompetent. When he tried to spin wild stories about a setup, the weight of the evidence crushed any credibility he had left. He became a pariah, a cautionary tale for those who had once considered him a rising star. Claire fared no better. The rumors of her affair spread like wildfire, eroding the carefully constructed image of the devoted wife and socialite she had worked so hard to build. Her friends avoided her calls. Her invitations went unanswered. Even her family distanced themselves, leaving her alone with nothing but the fragments of a life she had shattered. Months later, I found myself standing on a beach, the salty breeze ruffling my hair. Life had moved on. The firm was gone. Claire and Daniel were distant memories. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of betrayal had lifted, replaced by something I had not anticipated, peace. Revenge had been my path to closure, but it was letting go that finally set me free. No longer did I carry the burden of their lies, their deceit. I was free to start over, to rebuild in a way I never thought possible. The world had shifted, and so had I. If you have any thoughts on this story, we'd love to hear from you. Your comments help us shape the stories we share and bring you the narratives that matter most. Thank you for watching.